Welcome to this tutorial on global filters. This is a functionality that has recently been added to version 8.1 to both the Mac and the Windows version. The functionality is very similar in both the Mac and the Windows version. Global filters can be set in the managers at the moment. So let me open the document manager, and first I would like to explain the difference between a local filter and a global filter. So this is the Children and Happiness project you might be familiar with from the quick tour and other tutorials I've been doing, and it also contains some survey data, and so we have some document groups for the classical socio-demographic characteristics like education. So these are my cases where respondents have high school education, here where they have some college education, or whether they are male or female. So the local filter is indicated with this pale yellow background color, and this filter only applies now to this manager. It's quite useful if I only want to focus on a particular group of documents, or if I also want to set or create a smart group as filter. So actually I want to combine all males that have a university degree, and then I want to preserve this subgroup, and now I can actually create a smart group, and I can leave the default name here. Now I have a smart group for my males with university degrees. So all those things I can solve with local filters. But if I want to apply this now for my analysis, also in other tools in Atlas, I need to set a global filter. So if I now set this smart group as global filter, and I can do that with the right click and say set global filter. So then I can see all other areas that are affected. So for once here, the Explorer. So if I open up the documents here, now I can only see those 5 documents. And also the quotations are affected. And if you look at the colors, the documents have a blue color, and if I go back to the home ribbon, then you see quotations are orange. So quotation filter is indicated. It's an orange color. Codes are green, memos are magenta, networks are purple. And so all the filters that are set take on the colors of their entities. So with the global document filter, you also set a quotation filter at the same time. Currently it doesn't yet have an effect also on the codes, but that will be an option in the future. So this would now mean if I go to the Code Manager, I don't see that there's any filters set, and oftentimes people have the question, please only show me the codes that occur within those 5 filtered documents. So that will become in an implementation version 2, so to speak. Also in this version 1 implementation, you can only set groups as global filter. The workaround, if you only want to have one document or one code as global filter, would be to just create a group that only has one element in it. So you can actually then set it as global filter. So how or why do we need global filters? In order to answer certain types of questions. For example, if I now open the Quotation Manager, which now only shows the quotation of all those males with a university degree, And I then also combine this with the code, and I know that these survey respondents have only answered the question for reasons for having and not having children. So let's see whether any of those males with university degree have said something about the reasons for not having children is self-centeredness. So I have 3 responses, and now I can click through and I see the result. Or I might also create a report to Word, PDF or Excel if I wanted to. So I want to compare this now. I just float the document manager here, and let's say I take out this filter now, and I want to compare actually male and female respondents. So I set a global filter for female, so I see all the 6 quotations from my female respondents and what they have said about self-centeredness with regard to not having children. And then I can go to males and also set it as global filter. So this filter is now changing, and now I get the responses of my males with regard to the selected code. Yeah, and if I deactivate the filter here, then I get all quotations related to self-centeredness, and then I can also activate the filter here again. So the settings for activating or deactivating the filter always apply to the window where you're at. So if I activate or deactivate the document group filter here, then all documents are shown again, and I can activate the filter here again. So this is my project explorer here. I can also select multiple codes. So now we get actually the answer for all the responses by males with regard to the code self-centeredness, responsibility and personality. And we get always the number of total items, so we have actually 22 quotations and 8 quotations are filtered out of those 22. If I want to remove my filters, I can just click on that little X and all the filters are reset. That's the quickest way of doing it. You've seen here maybe also in the context menu you can set and remove global filters. That's another way actually of doing it. So let me show you another example where I now have set a code group here as local filter, but I also want to apply this as global filter and to make the selection in the Code Co-occurrence table a bit easier. So if I now set this as global filter, then I can focus solely on the codes that are relevant for a particular research question. Here now I want to compare the comments of those who have 1 or 2 or more children with regard to the negative effects of parenting, and also those comments of those who don't want children and those who actually have children. What do they have to say about the negative effects of parenting? So just keep in mind also it's a very small data set, so the numbers that we get won't be terribly high, but it serves as an example here. Just to remind you of the data, also if you're not familiar with the data, the information like whether somebody has a child or doesn't have a child or has 1 or 2 children needed to be coded in this data set, because I have 70-something respondents within one document. So here we have lots of cases within the document. There's also a video tutorial on the question of where's your case, so where you need to consider what do I need to code, where I can use document groups for. So in this particular document, or in actually two documents of this sample study, this information needed to be coded for. There's another document, these are comments on a New York Times Magazine article, and that looks similar. And you see that already I evoked the global filter, so all of these other codes are not shown. So here are only those codes now shown that are for negative effects of parenting, and all those what I call attribute codes. So now I want to continue my analysis, so I select the Code Co-occurrence Table, and now instead of a long list of codes to choose from, I only have those that are relevant for my research question. And maybe I do this slowly again. So if I select a group of codes, I can use the normal selection techniques. I use the shift key now to select this group of codes, and then I can click the space bar, then all of these are selected, so you don't have to actually select each single one of them. Yeah, with 4 I can, you know, possibly do it, but if you have a longer list, it's a bit cumbersome to select all of them one by one. So it's a small data set, so the t-coefficient doesn't really make much sense here. And I can also auto size the column so I can see the full name. And so now I see the results for my entire data set. And now I want to set a second global filter, and you can already see that here I have my document manager open, and I have actually created now one for just the parenting block. It only contains one entity, because I want to compare the comments on the parenting blog now with the comments that appeared in the New York Times Magazine article. So now you see that now I have no code anymore here in that column, so there weren't also not that many people on the parenting blog, but there were actually. Those people who don't want to have children, and before there was a code in here on relation. I now actually want to compare this New York Times comments and see how that picture looks like. And so I set a global filter for the New York Times comments, and here there were hardly comments of people with two or more children regarding negative effect of parenting. Only one here, some effects on self, but generally also here, similar to the Belkin parenting blog, a number of comments by those actually who have children. Of course it does make sense, because those who don't have children may also not know anything about the positive side of it. Now you could do the same, of course, also for the positive effects of parenting. So here, this was an example of combining a code group as global filter and also a document group as global filter. Here I want to show you an example in combination with the Code Documents table, which I now opened here via the analysis menu. And I'm going to select some codes here for reasons for having and not having children, and in order to reduce my list. For all codes I entered HC because it's in the code name. So also if you build your coding system, it might be an idea to enter some shortcuts. to indicate codes that belong together, so it's also easy then to use a search term to find all of those codes that to reduce or filter your list also by code names. So now I'm actually want to compare males and females, and these are now my survey respondents. And let me turn around the rows and the columns. So now we get the results now comparing all male and female survey respondents, and as before it's a small data set, only 24 respondents here, that's why the numbers are not terribly high, but it's just to show you how it works. So now we get an overview of how males and female responded based on what they had told us about reasons for having and not having children. And now actually I can also add a global filter to this table. And I have my document manager here. It's docked into a second tab group here to the right. And now I can actually now set a filter with regard to whether they have children, yes or no. So I set a global filter now. So the table now needs to refresh to update the numbers. So I click on the refresh button up here, and now I get the results for those who have no children, for males and females that do not have children. And likewise, I can also change the filter to children have children, yes, and set that as global filter. Again, I have to refresh the table, and now I get the numbers here. And let me pick on one result here. On reasons for not having children, self-centeredness. So we have 5 comments from females that have children on the issue of self-centeredness, and 2 comments by males who have children. And if I change the filter now again to don't have children, then we see here it changes. So we have only 2 females talking about it, and 4 males who do not have children actually give this as reason. So with a higher or larger sample, these numbers might become more meaningful, but just that you see how the numbers change. The code document table currently only provides numbers, and we have to go to the query tool, which we will do in the next step, to actually get the data behind it. In the update to version 8.2 coming in a few months' time, we will also be able to directly access the quotation behind these numbers. Yeah, for now we have the table here. We can now export it to Excel if you want the numbers. But to get the qualitative data, we currently have to use the query tool, and this is what I'm going to show you next. So I'm back to the home ribbon, so I click on Analyze Query Tool to open up the query tool. As this is a tutorial on global filters, I am just doing something very simple here in the query tool, just to show you how to also set filters that affect the query, and we also combine this with global filters if you want to. So I'm now here in the query tool. Left to it I have opened the document editor, and on the right hand side the document manager, so I can set global filters. So I filtered the list of codes already by self-centered, or the first letters of it, self-centeredness. So I can now just ask for all quotations for self-centeredness, I can double click and then it's in here, or I can also drag drop. So I delete this here now and drag drop it into that node here for querying the data. So as a result, I get 19 quotations. Yeah, that we also see here we have 19 codings in total. And as always, here at the bottom left, we see also the results in terms of numbers. So we can now access the data from within the query tool and look it up in context. I can now combine a scope and a global filter. For example, if I now want to find out which of these quotations are for my female survey respondents, I should go to the query tool and open the scope tool. So I click on Edit Scope to open this scope part of the query tool, and now I can either select the document group as scope or any of the single documents. So I want to set now the gender female as my scope, and then the entire list is filtered by my female respondents. So on top of that, I can also set a global filter, and I only want those female respondents who have children. Now I set a global filter, and now this list is reduced and it only contains comments by those who actually do have children. So I set now here the scope to have children, yes, plus female. And if I remove the global filter, I see all comments again. So I can now also change it to no children, and then I get these 2 quotations. And again, I can double click and watch the results in context. So I want to change the scope now to males. I click it here and click on delete in the scope tool, and now select male as my scope. Yeah, so I have 4 statements from males who do not have children. So if I want to have a report now of these quotations, so I don't want to view it in context, I actually want a report, you have to pay attention where you click on the report button. This report will actually give you all quotations of all male respondents because it's a report in the scope tool. So I actually want the report now for the query tool that actually has now 2 filters, the scope plus the global filter. So if I now click on report, I can go and do one of the quick predefined reports, and now I see the scope is set to gender male, and I have a total of 4 quotations, and it's a combination of local and global filter. And then I can go and read my quotations and also see that's the configuration of the standard report, and then see also whether I have used other codes, memos, or whether there are hyperlinks linked to that quotation. If you want to use a configure report, you click on just the report button, and then if you only want to read the content of the quotations, you click on the content button here, and then if you click on code, the whole option tree opens here, and you could select anything that you want. Just leave it now here. I just leave it here now with the content, and now I create the report. Again, here in the heading we have all the filter settings, and now we only get the for codes here with the reference. Yeah, it comes from document 15, 19, 22, and 24. You get the start and end positions and the document name. So we have case 9, 13, 16, and 18. So to remove the global filter, you can click on the X and then a global filter setting is gone. If you want to get rid of the scope completely, you should not just close the scope tool, because then the scope is still set. You see it here. Yeah, you need to remove the scope you have set, and then if you don't want to see the scope tool anymore, you can close it again. Yeah, and now the scope is the entire project, so you need to pay attention to that. The last thing I would show is how to set global filters or in networks and the effect this has. To show you an example how you might use global filters in combination with networks, I prepared a special code group that contains all the codes that I now need to answer my research question 2, which is to check or to explore whether those with 1, 2, or 3 children mention the same or different aspects of parenting, be it negative, which are the orange ones, blue are the more neutral, neither positive, negative effects, and the positive effects of parenting. In order now to use the import co-occurring function of the network editor, I need to set my code group now as global filter, as otherwise I would import all codes that I potentially have. So now I just first look at all the positive and negative neutral effects of mentioned by those who have 1 child, so I can later compare that. I link it now, so I hardwire the connection. I could now create a new relation like it's mentioned by, but I'm just using is associated for now. So this network I don't need further at this point, because I now need to do it for all of my 3 attribute codes, and I don't do it for, I can't do it all in one network, because otherwise I wouldn't see which ones are the new codes that are associated with just that one particular code. So I use this only as temporary networks. And already you see a bit of the difference here between those of 1 or 2 or 3 children. We only have now one positive, one negative effect for those who have 3 or more children, and the 2 neutral ones that we have here. So now we can actually extend this network by adding, I'll need to select the proper right one, selecting these other codes here again, and now I can actually use the import code neighboring option. I think that was off the screen, so let me do this here, because now I've linked it, so I can now actually import the neighbors, and this looks a bit like a mess, so I can actually now use the nice new layouting function, and I often start with the organic one depending on what I want to do. And you can also actually actually I want to do rerouting now, so you can actually also click on it a couple of times to if you want to have it a slight different variation of it. So before I do now the polyline rerouting, I spread them a bit across my windows so they are not so close to each other, and now I can actually make my lines look nice and fancy by doing the polyline rerouting. So here we have the 3 children, 1, and we see the 2 neutral aspect, 1 positive, 1 negative ones, and we see many more orange, or not many more, but we see some more orange negative effects on those who have 1 child, so it's the first experience of having children, and more positive effects are mentioned by those who have 2 children. Now, if you want to have a go at an interpretation, even though this is a very small data set. So to make it even more apparent, I actually prepared 2 more code groups that all also have the attribute codes in there, and then I'll change the global filter, and now we only leave the positive effects. And now take a look at the network. Yeah, we can now see where the positive effects are linked to those who have 1, 2, and 3 children. And if we change this now to the negative effects, we see that we have a lot of the negative effects here now linked to those who have 1 child. Yeah, if you make it even more obvious, you could. And so of course you can change a bit also the story you want to tell by positioning the nodes and adjusting the layout. We can access the data also behind the network here by double clicking and then listing the quotations, and then you can access the quotation in context if you want to. So now I'm having the network here big on the screen, but I could move it a bit to the side so we can actually also access the data behind these nodes in the network. Yeah, so I use the global filter here now to control the 2 features, importing code neighbors, and also what is imported when you select to import co-occurring codes. And the other effect of global filters is that those codes that are not part of the filter actually fade out in the background. And this kind of completes this tutorial on global filters. I showed you the effect of global filters, what you can do in the Quotation Manager to ask simple questions, create simple queries. We moved on to show you the effects in the co-occurrence table, especially in combination with document groups. And then I'm always used special code groups to filter my data so I can focus or zoom into just those codes that are relevant for a particular research question. And we looked at global filters in the query tool, also in combination with scope. And before we actually did that, we also applied global filters in the code document table. And here in the last step, now we applied it to the network function. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and can think of lots of good research questions now that you can follow up, given your own data and exploring this new tool. Goodbye.